In this weary world, we too often awake wondering what shattering of the heart today will bring in this world. Joy is an act of resistance and singing too. Hope is a stubborn practice, an insistent assertion that not everything can be undone. So let us come now determined to lift up our eyes to the beauty that is here even now. Let us come to lift our voices with brave boldness. Let us lean into one another and our breath with gratitude. Let us be resolute in our reunion, feeling ourselves still here and together, unwilling to forsake forgiveness, kindness, friendship, or love, unwilling to concede any part of ourselves or our world to anything other than grace and goodness. Look around and give thanks. Everything we need is here. Come, let us worship together.
We light the chalice. For the new era, just days old, beginning today, always beginning. We light our chalice, symbol of faith, perseverance, and hope, in astonished thanksgiving and irrepressible praise. For beginnings that emerge out of endings, appear amidst continuity, become visible in hindsight. We light our chalice, symbol of faith, perseverance, and hope, in astonished thanksgiving and irrepressible praise. For all the times and all the ways we have begun anew together. We light our chalice, symbol of faith, perseverance, and hope, in astonished thanksgiving and irrepressible praise.
I invite you now into a spirit of meditation and prayer. Spirit of life, spirit of love, spirit of hope. We breathe into a new era full of excitement and anxiety and still an ongoing pandemic that frustrates. Things have changed, but not everything has changed. And we wonder how to hold all of our realities and more, how to keep on moving forward, knowing there is still so much work to do to draw the circle of love wide. And so we pray for strength that we not become complacent. May we commit today to being a voice that refuses to call for unity without accountability, a voice that demands interrogation of the normalcy that so many lazily say we need, a voice that sows tough, steady love for the vision of who we can become if we will only actively embody it. May we listen to voices who will strengthen our own when we grow hoarse. And may we regularly nudge ourselves and one another awake, especially during this time when our celebration can turn so quickly and easily into sleepiness. May we keep on moving forward in love, in covenant. So say we all, blessed be, Ashe, and Amen. A presidential inauguration is many things. It is a constitutional requirement at the bare minimum, installing new officers by swearing an oath. But as we witness every 4 years, it is also a time of pomp and circumstance, of ritual and tradition. And it is more. It is a time to set a direction, an intention, a focus. It's often the last time we hear visionary language from someone who must now leave behind the poetry and govern in prose. For some, the vision is encapsulated in the patriotic rituals and patriotic songs, and that idealized vision is enough. But for others, the vision is less idealized, less definable, and so they invite a poet whose words, especially in times of great difficulty, invite us in some ways to reconcile us to our world, and allow us a measure of tenderness and grace with which to exist. This wasn't always the way. Inaugurations, of course, had been public events since George Washington. And when technology allowed, they were broadcast on the radio and then television. But it wasn't until 1961 that an inauguration included a poet. John F. Kennedy, much like Joe Biden, was inclined to finish speeches with lines of poetry, and he understood the power of this still fairly new TV medium better than his predecessors. He knew poetry would cut through the political rhetoric and help set a tone heard by the nation. Now, some of you may know this story. Robert Frost, who at age 86 was asked to compose a poem for the occasion, wrote a longer piece called Dedication that had specific references to Kennedy in the context of America's evolution from colony to superpower, and how there was a place still for art in this scientific age. Yet on the day, a combination of age, poor eyesight, and blinding sun reflecting on the snow meant that Frost could not read the words in front of him. And so instead he recited the shorter A Gift Outright from memory, which not only made for great television, but also really set the tone Kennedy sought more metaphorically. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she will become. Which asks the question that Kennedy answers with, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country, right? Jimmy Carter was the next to invite a poet, although James Dickey was excluded from the actual inauguration ceremony and recited The Strength of Fields at the Kennedy Center Gala later that night. Imagine if we had heard these lines on that crisp January morning. Lord, let me shake with purpose. Wild hope can always spring from tended strength. Everything is in that and nothing but kindness. More kindness, dear Lord of the renewing green. That is where it all has to start, with the simplest things. More kindness will do nothing less than save every sleeping one and night walking one of us. My life belongs to the world. I will do what I can. But then poetry appeared again, as if a breath of fresh air at Bill Clinton's 1992 inaugural. Maya Angelou's On the Pulse of Morning was not just an indictment of the disastrous Gulf War. It was not just a message to a new president who came from a place called hope. It was a message to all of us. You, created only a little lower than angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long face down in ignorance. Your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, and you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. Angelou exhorted us and captivated us, and as poet Percy Shelley writes, purge from our inward sight the film of familiarity which obscures from us the wonder of our being. In other words, bypassing the common rhetoric, the all too familiar language of politics, and speaking directly to our hearts. Continuing the conversation was Miller Fields at Clinton's second inaugural. He wrote, we have memorized America, how it was born and who we have been and where. But where are we going to be and why and who? The disenfranchised dead want to know. We mean to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go. 12 years later, Barack Obama's poet, Elizabeth Alexander, draws our attention from the huge problems we cannot solve alone, ongoing war, recession, racial tensions, and back to what we've been missing, each other. Her poem begins, each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise, all about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. And 4 years later, Richard Blanco, who was also the 2019 Ware Lecturer at General Assembly in Spokane, reinforced that theme. My face, your face, millions of faces in morning's mirrors, each one yawning to life, crescendoing into our day. Pencil yellow school buses, the rhythm of traffic lights, fruit stands, apples, limes, and oranges, arrayed like rainbows, begging our praise. Silver trucks heavy with oil or paper, bricks or milk teeming over highways alongside us. On our way to clean tables, read ledgers or save lives, to teach geometry or ring up groceries as my mother did for 20 years, so I could write this poem. We hear truth in these poems, deep truths about who we are and who we want to become. But the poet's job isn't to tell the truth. As Aaron Sorkin's character Tabitha Fortis says, the poet's job is to captivate you for however long we've asked for your attention. If we stumble into truth, we got lucky, and I don't get to decide what truth is. And sometimes the truth even the truth stumbled upon is impossible to bear. As poet Mina Alexander writes in her essay, What Use is Poetry? There have been moments in our shared human history in particular parts of the world where poets and also singers have been banned. But why? What is there to fear? Precisely this, the force of the quicksilver self that poetry sets free, desire that can never be bound by laws and legislations. This is the force of the human spirit, the spirit level of our lives. It is perhaps notable who did and did not have poets at their inaugurations, and this isn't the place for a political analysis, but I think it says something about competing visions, about what a tone a president needs to set in order to do the hard work that faces them, what they need to do to inspire in the nation and in us. And so we have this growing body of inaugural poetry meant to speak to us in ways that prose cannot, meant to cut through the rhetoric and saying the unsayable directly to our heart, in language that is used all the time and all around us in sound bites and advertisements, political rhetoric, newsprint. A poet takes our language and shifts it and molds it, and the poem in its active meaning making turns away from the literal, its truth bound to what can be evoked. As President Biden's inaugural poet Amanda Gorman noted in an interview this week with Anderson Cooper, she got a line from her poem from tweets and messages and articles and seeing what stood out. The line, we've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it. And then turning these messages into a piece of art that cut through the medium so we could hear the truth of what needed to be heard. We already know the power of poetry in our faith. Even those who don't access poetry easily welcome poems as opening readings in meetings and covenant groups. We fill our worship services with Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry and yes, Maya Angelou. These are our sacred texts that inspire and hold us. We sing hymns that are full of poetry, often are poems set to music. We use the language of poetry in our meditations of prayer. Spirit of life, divine creator, holy one, infinite all. These metaphors, this poetry set a tone that this is something special, maybe something sacred, something connected not just to our minds, but our hearts and our spirits. Sometimes we lean into poetry that is lyric, metaphorical, talking of wild geese and the flow of hair and the plums that were in the icebox. And sometimes the poetry is stronger and faster and more urgent, more plain. We saw this at Biden's inauguration when, as author Tracy Dion said on Twitter, Amanda Gorman didn't recite poetry, she rained poetry down upon us. It's not a mistake that our newest poet laureate is a slam poet, a rap poet, a beat poet. It's not a mistake that her poetry is full of wordplay and linguistic urgency. In a time when words have been assigned alternate meanings, when the specter of Orwellian doublespeak has been on full display, Gorman reclaims for us the power of words to mean what we need them to mean. We know all too well after these last 4 years that whoever controls the words controls the world. And so Gorman controls the words and reclaims them for us. The rhymes come in slant and the meaning becomes clear. She writes this: we've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always justice. It is the truth we need right now evoked. Yet it was not just the truth laid bare. Gorman, like the poets she follows, held open that same door that Frost first opened, the door of this unfinished nation. Frost wrote, and yes, or Gorman writes, and yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. We hear this in Blanco. We head home through the gloss of rain or weight or snow, or the plum blush of dusk, but always home, always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon like a silver drum tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country, all of us, facing the stars, hope, a new constellation waiting for us to map it, waiting for us to name it together. We hear it in Alexander. In today's sharp sparkle of this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp, praise song for walking forward in that light. And of course, in Frost. But still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she will become. We are not finished. We are far from polished. And these words speak not only about the nation, but about us, about our communities, our congregations, ourselves. Unitarian Universalism is many things, but it is perhaps most significantly an aspirational faith. A faith of vision, a faith of imagination, a faith of hope. From our Unitarian belief in unity to our Universalist belief in one loving God and the exhortation to love the hell out of this world, care for one another, make the world a more just, equitable, and compassionate place. Well, it is full of hope. And that hope is not wrapped up with a tiny bow. We are covenantal, which means it's about relationship, growing, changing. Revelation is not sealed, we say, and that's not just about big truths, but about all that is our lives. This is who we are. A people who believe there will be better days. A people who can imagine the beloved community and our participation in making it so matters. We are a people who believe we can come back to the table when things go wrong and do better. We are a people who believe we can build a new way, a way that is never finished. I mean, the moral arc of the universe does bend toward justice, but I don't know if it will ever fully get there. Like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it's elusive, but always calling, always promising. This is what poetry gets us to. helping us to reconcile us to the world, not to accept it at face value or to assent to things that are wrong, but to reconcile one in a larger sense, to return us in love, the province of the imagination, the scope of our mortal lives. This poetry calls us, is the call of the poets, it's the call of our faith, it's the call of humanity. We close, as Maya Angelou did at Clinton's first inauguration. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Go in love, go in joy, go in hope.
Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparkling through space one to another, connecting us invisibly, but palpably. We are one, and from every window our light shines.